The Indian Army is the land-based branch of the Indian Armed Forces. It is the second largest standing army in the world, with over 1.3 million active troops and another million in reserve. The Indian Army was established in 1947, after India gained independence from British rule. The President of India is the Commander-in-Chief of the Indian Army. The Indian Army is responsible for protecting the country's borders and maintaining internal security. The motto of the Indian Army is, "Service before self." The Indian Army is divided into 6 operational commands, each headed by a General Officer Commanding-in-Chief, GOC&C. The Indian Army is equipped with a wide range of weapons, including rifles, machine guns, artillery, tanks, and missiles. The Indian Army is actively involved in counter-insurgency operations in various parts of the country, including Jammu and Kashmir, the northeast, and central India. The Indian Army has a dedicated mountaineering and skiing institute in Gulmarg, Jammu and Kashmir, which trains troops in mountain warfare and winter sports. The Indian Army has a significant presence in United Nations peacekeeping missions, with over 7,000 troops deployed in various countries. The Indian Army has a rich history, dating back to the ancient times of the Mauryan Empire and the Mughal Empire. The Indian Army has fought in numerous wars, including the First and Second World Wars, the Indo-Pakistani Wars of 1947, 1965, and 1971, and the Kargil War of 1999. The Indian Army's highest gallantry award is the Param Veer Chakra, which has been awarded to 21 soldiers to date. The Indian Army's highest peacetime gallantry award is the Ashoka Chakra, which has been awarded to 36 soldiers to date. The Indian Army's Chief of Army Staff, COAS, is the highest-ranking officer of the Army, and is appointed by the President of India. The Indian Army's training academies include the Indian Military Academy, IMA, in Dehradun, the Officers Training Academy, OTA, in Chennai, and the National Defence Academy, NDA, in Khadakwasla, Pune. The Indian Army has its own medical corps, the Army Medical Corps, AMC, which provides medical services to soldiers and their families. The Indian Army has a dedicated intelligence unit, the Directorate of Military Intelligence, DMI, which collects and analyzes intelligence from various sources. The Indian Army has a significant presence in Siachen Glacier, the world's highest battlefield, located in Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian Army has a dedicated aviation unit, the Army Aviation Corps, AAC, which operates helicopters and other aircraft. The Indian Army's Parachute Regiment is one of the most elite units in the Army, and is trained in airborne operations and Special Forces operations. The Indian Army's Special Forces units include the Para-Commandos, the Garud Commandos, and the Marcos. The Indian Army has a dedicated Corps of Engineers, the Corps of Engineers, which is responsible for providing engineering support to the Army. The Indian Army has a significant presence in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, where it operates the Andaman and Nicobar Command, a tri-service command. The Indian Army has a dedicated logistics corps, the Army Service Corps, ASC, which is responsible for providing logistic support to the Army. The Indian Army has a dedicated Signals Corps, the Corps of Signals, which is responsible for providing communication. The Indian Army has a dedicated intelligence unit for electronic warfare, the Corps of Electronic and Mechanical Engineers, EAM. The Indian Army operates its own military farms, which produce dairy and other agricultural products for use by the Army. The Indian Army operates its own military hospitals, which provide medical care to soldiers and their families. The Indian Army has a dedicated unit for handling nuclear, biological and chemical warfare, the Corps of Nuclear, Biological and Chemical Warfare, NBC. The Indian Army operates its own military schools, which provide education to the children of Army personnel. The Indian Army has a dedicated Corps of Military Police, the Corps of Military Police, CMP, which is responsible for maintaining discipline and law and order within the Army. The Indian Army has a dedicated Corps of Veterinary Doctors, the Remount and Veterinary Corps, RVC, which is responsible for the health and welfare of Army animals. The Indian Army has a dedicated unit for psychological operations, the Psychological Operations, Psyops, unit. The Indian Army has a dedicated unit for handling cyber warfare, the Corps of Signals, Information Technology. The Indian Army's military bands are famous for their performances and are highly regarded across the country. The Indian Army has a dedicated unit for handling mountain warfare, the High Altitude Warfare School, HAWS. The Indian Army's Rashtriya Rifles is a counter-insurgency force that operates in Jammu and Kashmir. The Indian Army has a dedicated unit for handling desert warfare, the Desert Warfare School, DWS. The Indian Army's Infantry School is responsible for training soldiers in infantry tactics and operations. The Indian Army has a dedicated unit for handling jungle warfare, the Counter-Insurgency and Jungle Warfare, CIJW, School. The Indian Army has a dedicated unit for handling urban warfare, the Army Urban Warfare School, AUWS. The Indian Army's Army Dental Corps provides dental care to soldiers and their families. The Indian Army's Army Education Corps provides education and training to Army personnel. The Indian Army's Army Postal Service is responsible for providing postal services to soldiers deployed in remote and inaccessible areas. The Indian Army has a dedicated unit for handling coastal warfare, the Army Coastal Defense Regiment, ACDR. The Indian Army's Military Farm School in Meerut is the world's largest military dairy farm. The Indian Army's Army Aviation Corps operates a wide range of helicopters, including transport, attack, and reconnaissance helicopters. The Indian Army's Army Sports Institute in Pune trains soldiers in various sports, and has produced many top-level athletes for the country.